They invited their broke and single 40-year-old sister to a gala to mock her. By the end of the night, not one of them would be laughing. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below, and if you believe dignity matters more than status, hit like and subscribe. Now, back to Danielle Brooks. The envelope arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, tucked between a utility bill and a grocery store flyer in the narrow mailbox outside Danielle's apartment building. She almost threw it away. The cream-colored paper looked too elegant for someone like her. Gold lettering shimmered beneath the hallway light, and for a moment, she thought it had been delivered to the wrong address. Danielle stood there in her faded work shoes, a canvas tote hanging from her shoulder, her fingers still cold from the walk home. She carefully turned the envelope over. Her name was written in flowing script. Danielle Brooks. No mistake. No confusion. It was meant for her. Her heart skipped. She hadn't received a formal invitation in years. Slowly, she opened it. The card inside was thick and expensive, the kind of stationery she had only seen in magazines while waiting at doctors' offices. The Brooks Foundation Annual Gala. Saturday evening. Black tie attire. Guests of honor included prominent business leaders, philanthropists, and community figures. Danielle read the words twice. Then a third time. At the bottom was a handwritten note. We hope you'll join us. Family is important. Love, Vanessa. Danielle stared at the signature. Vanessa Brooks. Her older sister. The same sister who hadn't called in nearly 3 years. The same sister who once told her that some people were simply meant to stay behind, while others moved forward. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Danielle sat down slowly on the worn staircase leading to the second floor of her building. She read the note again. Family is important. The words felt strange, almost unfamiliar. For 8 years, family had not seemed important at all. Not when their father became ill. Not when hospital visits replaced holidays. Not when Danielle spent night after night sleeping in uncomfortable chairs beside his bed while her siblings posted vacation photos and celebrated promotions. She remembered every missed birthday, every unanswered message, every promise to visit that never became reality. Yet somehow, despite everything, a small part of her still wanted to believe. Maybe people changed. Maybe time softened old wounds. Maybe this invitation was exactly what it appeared to be. An olive branch. A second chance. A way back to something she thought she had lost forever. Upstairs, her apartment was quiet except for the hum of an aging refrigerator. The place was small, barely 700 square feet, but it was clean. Danielle set the invitation on the kitchen table and looked around. The peeling paint. The second-hand furniture. The stack of unpaid bills tucked beneath a coffee mug. She knew what her siblings would see if they walked through that door. Failure. 40 years old. Single. Working 2 jobs. No husband. No children. No impressive title attached to her name. Yet they would never see the years she sacrificed caring for their father. They would never see the nights she cried alone after his passing. They would never see the quiet strength it took to keep going when nobody noticed. Danielle reached for the invitation once more. Through the rain-speckled window, the city lights flickered in the distance like scattered stars. Somewhere beyond them, preparations for the gala were already underway. Crystal chandeliers would shine. Expensive suits would fill grand ballrooms. Laughter would echo beneath ceilings taller than anything she had ever lived under. And for reasons she could not explain, she felt a strange unease settle into her chest. Because while Danielle Brooks believed she had been invited to reconnect with her family across the city, in rooms she had never entered, people were already preparing for her arrival. Not everyone was waiting to welcome her. Some were waiting to laugh. The invitation remained on the kitchen table for 3 days. Every morning before leaving for work, Danielle glanced at it. Every evening when she returned, exhausted and carrying groceries, she carefully budgeted down to the last dollar. It was still there, waiting for her. By Friday night, she finally sat down and made herself face memories she usually kept locked away. The rain had stopped, and the city outside her apartment window glowed beneath streetlights and distant traffic. Danielle wrapped both hands around a mug of tea and stared into the darkness. 8 years earlier, when their father received his diagnosis, everything had changed. At first, everyone promised they would help. Vanessa flew in for a weekend and talked about creating a schedule. Trevor assured everyone he would contribute financially. Their mother, Helen, cried and spoke about families sticking together through difficult times. But promises had a way of fading once reality arrived. Doctor appointments became weekly. Medications became expensive. Emergencies happened in the middle of the night. Danielle found herself taking time off work again and again until eventually she left a promising management position altogether. Someone had to be there. Someone had to answer the phone at 2 in the morning. Someone had to drive 40 miles through heavy traffic when a nurse called with concerns. That someone became Danielle. Months turned into years. Her savings disappeared first, then her retirement account, then the small dreams she had quietly carried for herself. Graduate school, traveling, owning a home. Dating became impossible. Friendships slowly faded. While other people built careers and families, Danielle learned how to read medical charts, organize prescriptions, and sleep in uncomfortable hospital chairs. She never complained. She simply did what needed to be done. Yet the more she sacrificed, the less visible she seemed to become. Vanessa's business expanded. Trevor moved into a gated community outside the city. Holiday photos appeared online featuring smiling faces, luxury vacations, and celebration dinners. Danielle was rarely included. If she appeared at all, she stood in the background beside their father, looking tired while everyone else looked successful. The irony was that their father understood everything. During his final year, he often squeezed her hand and apologized, not because of his illness, but because he knew what it had cost her. One autumn evening, as golden leaves drifted outside his hospital window, he had looked at Danielle with tears in his eyes. "You gave up too much for me," he whispered. Danielle remembered smiling and shaking her head. "No," she told him softly. "I gave what family is supposed to give." Those words stayed with her long after he passed away. But after the funeral, something unexpected happened. Instead of bringing everyone closer together, the family drifted even further apart. Calls became rare. Invitations disappeared. Eventually, years passed with little more than occasional birthday messages. That was why the gala invitation felt so strange. Family is important. The words echoed inside her mind. Danielle wanted to believe them. She wanted to believe that somewhere beneath the distance and disappointment, her siblings still remembered who she was, still remembered everything they had survived together. Yet deep inside, a quiet voice warned her to be careful. Because sometimes people invited you back into their lives not because they valued you. Sometimes they invited you back because they had already decided what role they wanted you to play. Across the city, preparations for the gala unfolded beneath sparkling chandeliers and polished marble floors. Staff members moved swiftly between tables dressed in ivory linens, while event planners checked seating charts one final time. Everything looked elegant, refined, and welcoming. But behind several carefully rehearsed smiles, a different plan was taking shape. Vanessa Brooks stood near the ballroom entrance holding a glass of sparkling water as she reviewed the guest list. Her designer gown shimmered beneath the lights, and her expression carried the confidence of someone accustomed to being admired. Beside her stood Trevor Brooks, scrolling through messages on his phone. "She actually said yes," Vanessa said with a short laugh. Trevor glanced up. "You sound surprised." "I am surprised. After all these years, I thought she would decline." Trevor slipped his phone into his pocket. Danielle still wants to believe the best about people. That has always been her problem. Vanessa smiled faintly. "That is exactly why tonight will work." Nearby, several guests listened with curiosity. Most knew Vanessa as a successful entrepreneur and major donor. Few knew much about her older sister. Vanessa seemed eager to change that. Throughout the evening, she casually introduced the topic whenever conversation allowed. "My sister is coming tonight," she told one group. "We have not seen much of each other lately." Her tone sounded innocent, but the details that followed carried a different purpose. She mentioned Danielle's small apartment. She mentioned her lack of career success. She mentioned that Danielle had never married. Every sentence was delivered with a smile carefully disguised as concern. By the time dinner service began, dozens of guests felt as though they already knew Danielle despite never meeting her. In their minds, she had become a sad story before she had even entered the room. Trevor contributed in his own way. During cocktail hour, he joked openly with several business associates. "Wait until you meet my sister," he said. "She still thinks hard work alone solves everything." Laughter followed. Not cruel laughter at first, just polite amusement. Yet each comment added another layer to the image they were building. A woman who had fallen behind. A woman who represented failure in a family filled with success. Meanwhile, Danielle sat alone in her apartment, completely unaware of the conversations unfolding around her. She had spent the afternoon searching through her closet. Dresses hung from plastic hangers, each 1 year old. Eventually, she selected a simple navy blue gown she had worn only once before. It was not fashionable. It was not expensive, but it was elegant in its own quiet way. Standing before the mirror, Danielle smoothed the fabric with nervous hands. For a moment, she wondered if she belonged at an event like this. Then she remembered the note. Family is important. The words encouraged her once more. She carefully fastened a pair of modest earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. They were among her most treasured possessions. Looking at her reflection, she saw neither failure nor success. She saw a woman who had endured disappointment without becoming bitter. A woman who had given more than anyone realized. As twilight settled over the city skyline, limousines began arriving at the gala venue one after another. Guests stepped onto the red carpet beneath flashing cameras and warm greetings. Inside the ballroom, Vanessa checked the entrance once again. Her smile widened. The guest she had been waiting for all evening was finally on her way. The ballroom glowed like a scene from another world. Crystal chandeliers scattered warm light across polished floors. Waiters moved gracefully between tables carrying silver trays, while a string quartet played softly from a stage framed by towering floral arrangements. Danielle paused just inside the entrance, taking in the sight before her. For a brief moment, she felt underdressed despite spending nearly an hour preparing. Around her stood people wearing tailored tuxedos, designer gowns, and jewelry that caught the light with every movement. She instinctively smoothed her navy blue dress and reminded herself to breathe. A hostess checked her invitation and smiled politely before guiding her toward the reception area. Danielle had barely taken 3 steps when she heard her name. Danielle. Vanessa approached with open arms and a bright smile. Anyone watching would have assumed they were close sisters. Vanessa embraced her lightly before stepping back and examining her appearance. You made it. Danielle smiled. Thank you for inviting me. Of course, Vanessa replied. Family is important. The words sounded familiar, yet somehow empty. Trevor soon joined them carrying a drink. He greeted Danielle with a quick nod before looking her up and down. You still have that dress? He asked casually. I remember seeing it years ago. Danielle laughed softly. I guess some things last longer than people expect. Trevor chuckled, but there was something sharp beneath it. Vanessa quickly led Danielle deeper into the ballroom. As they moved between tables, introductions began. This is my sister Danielle, Vanessa told one group. She is the most dedicated person you will ever meet. The compliment sounded kind until she added, she spent years taking care of our father. That became her entire life, actually. Several guests exchanged sympathetic smiles. Danielle noticed the subtle shift immediately. They were not admiring her. They were pitying her. The pattern continued throughout the evening. Every introduction seemed to include another detail. Danielle lived alone. Danielle worked multiple jobs. Danielle never married. Danielle sacrificed everything for family. Each fact was technically true, yet together they painted a portrait she barely recognized. Soon the questions started. A woman in a diamond necklace tilted her head thoughtfully. So are you seeing anyone? Danielle smiled politely. No, not at the moment. That must be difficult, the woman replied. Another guest joined the conversation. Have you ever thought about moving into management? My nephew started with nothing and became regional director in 5 years. Danielle answered graciously, but each exchange left her feeling smaller. Across the room, Trevor entertained several guests with stories that conveniently highlighted his own success. More than once Danielle heard laughter immediately after someone glanced in her direction. The realization settled slowly in her chest. This was not a reunion. This was a performance. She had been invited to play a role. The struggling sister. The cautionary tale. The example everyone could compare themselves against and feel better. Her fingers tightened around her water glass. For a moment, she considered leaving. No one would stop her. No one would care. Then she remembered her father's voice. The quiet dignity he carried even during his hardest days. Danielle lifted her chin and remained exactly where she was. She would not give anyone the satisfaction of watching her run. Yet as the evening continued, she could not shake the feeling that something larger was unfolding around her. Somewhere beyond the conversations, beyond the laughter, Beyond the carefully arranged humiliation, unseen eyes were already watching everything. From the ballroom floor, the second level appeared almost empty. Most guests were too busy networking, laughing, and admiring one another to notice the private balcony overlooking the event. Yet from that quiet vantage point, a man stood watching everything. Adrian Moretti rested one hand against the railing as his gaze moved across the crowd below. At 38, he carried the kind of presence that made people lower their voices when he entered a room. His tailored black suit fit perfectly. His silver watch reflected the chandelier light. Around him stood several executives and foundation board members eager for his attention, but Adrian barely heard their conversations. Something else had captured his focus. Earlier that evening, he had arrived through a private entrance reserved for major donors. The event organizers immediately surrounded him. There were handshakes, introductions, and requests for photographs. Adrian handled each interaction politely, yet his attention remained distant. He had attended hundreds of galas over the years. Most followed the same formula: speeches, fundraising, networking, carefully rehearsed smiles. Tonight seemed no different until he noticed a woman standing alone near the center of the ballroom. At first, she appeared unremarkable compared to the wealth surrounding her. Her dress was simple, her jewelry modest. She carried herself without any attempt to impress anyone. Yet while others seemed desperate to be noticed, she seemed content to disappear. Adrian observed her quietly as the evening unfolded. He watched guests approach her with thinly disguised pity. He watched conversations that began politely but ended with subtle condescension. Most importantly, he watched how she responded. No bitterness, no anger, no desperate attempt to defend herself. She listened. She smiled. She answered with dignity. The more Adrian observed, the more intrigued he became. Nearby, a foundation director leaned closer. "Everyone is excited you are here tonight," the man said. Adrian nodded absently. His eyes remained fixed on the ballroom below. "Who is she?" he asked. The director followed his gaze. "Danielle Brooks." Adrian repeated the name silently. Something about it felt familiar. The director continued. "She is related to Vanessa Brooks, the successful entrepreneur sponsoring tonight's event." Adrian noticed the way the director emphasized Vanessa's accomplishments while almost dismissing Danielle entirely. Then another detail caught his attention. Across the room, Vanessa was once again entertaining a group of guests. Laughter followed something she said. Several people glanced directly toward Danielle before smiling awkwardly. Adrian's expression hardened slightly. He had seen this dynamic before. Different city, different faces. Same cruelty hidden beneath polished manners. One guest beside him chuckled. Every family has one relative who never quite figures life out. Adrian did not laugh. Instead, he looked back at Danielle. At that exact moment, she was helping an elderly server gather several dropped napkins near a table. No cameras, no audience, no expectation of recognition. Just a simple act of kindness performed without hesitation. The server thanked her. Danielle smiled and returned to standing alone. Something shifted in Adrian's eyes, because suddenly he remembered another evening years earlier. A rainy night, a hospital corridor, a woman offering comfort to a frightened stranger when nobody else stopped to help. He had only seen her briefly then, long enough to remember her face, long enough to remember her kindness, long enough to understand that some people revealed their character when nobody was watching. And now, as the noise of the gala continued around him, Adrian Moretti realized he was looking at the same woman. The memory returned with startling clarity. 7 years earlier, Adrian had been sitting alone in a hospital corridor after a difficult surgery involving his mother. The waiting room had been crowded, the atmosphere heavy with uncertainty. Doctors moved quickly through the halls. Families whispered prayers. Fear seemed to linger in every corner of the building. Adrian remembered pacing near a vending machine, exhausted after nearly 36 hours without proper sleep. His mother had always been the strongest person in his life, and seeing her vulnerable had shaken him more than he ever admitted. Most people who recognized him kept their distance. Some stared, others pretended not to notice him. But one person had walked over carrying 2 cups of coffee. She had been wearing simple clothes and looked just as tired as everyone else. Without introducing herself, she offered him one of the cups. "You look like you need this more than I do," she had said. Adrian remembered staring at her in surprise. Very few people approached him without wanting something. Fewer still offered kindness with no expectation of receiving anything in return. They spoke for less than 10 minutes. She told him she was caring for her father. She spoke about long nights, difficult decisions, and learning to appreciate small moments. When Adrian attempted to repay her, she refused. When he offered assistance, she politely declined. Then a nurse called her name, and she disappeared down the hallway. At the time, Adrian never learned who she was. Yet he remembered her face because of what happened later. During the following weeks, he occasionally saw her again, always helping someone, comforting an elderly patient, carrying flowers for a family who looked overwhelmed, bringing snacks to nurses working late shifts. Small acts, quiet acts, the kind most people never noticed. And now, standing above the ballroom years later, Adrian finally understood why the memory had stayed with him. It was Danielle, the same woman everyone below seemed determined to dismiss. The same woman standing alone near the edge of the room while conversations flowed around her. Adrian watched as another guest approached Danielle. The woman spoke briefly before giving Danielle a sympathetic smile and walking away. Danielle's expression never changed, but Adrian could see the disappointment she worked so hard to hide. Around her, groups formed and dissolved. Laughter echoed beneath the chandeliers. Yet somehow she remained separate from all of it, invisible in a room full of people. A board member stepped beside Adrian. "The award presentation begins in 20 minutes, he said. Adrian nodded. His eyes never left the ballroom floor. 20 minutes. For everyone else, the evening was proceeding exactly as planned. For Vanessa and Trevor, their carefully constructed narrative remained intact. Guests saw Danielle as a woman who had failed to keep pace with the rest of her family. They saw what they had been encouraged to see. What none of them understood was that the most important person in the building had been paying attention. Adrian slowly adjusted his cufflink and looked toward the grand staircase leading from the balcony to the ballroom below. A decision had already formed in his mind. Not because Danielle needed rescuing. Not because he felt sorry for her. But because truth mattered. And sometimes all it took to change an entire room was for the right person to tell the truth at the right moment. Down below, Danielle glanced toward the balcony without realizing why. For the briefest second, her eyes met Adrian's across the distance. She did not recognize him, but Adrian recognized her. And for the first time that evening, he started walking toward the stairs. The first person to notice Adrian Moretti descending the staircase was a member of the foundation board. His conversation stopped mid-sentence. Then another guest turned. Then another. Like a ripple spreading across still water, attention slowly shifted through the ballroom. Adrian moved without hurry. He did not wave. He did not seek attention. Yet attention followed him anyway. People stepped aside instinctively as he crossed the room. Several guests attempted to greet him. Others extended hands or offered polite introductions. Adrian acknowledged them with brief nods, but never stopped walking. His destination remained unchanged. At the center of the ballroom, Danielle was speaking with an elderly donor who had been kind enough to treat her like a human being instead of a curiosity. She did not immediately notice the growing silence around her. She did not see heads turning. She did not see Vanessa's smile slowly fading as confusion appeared in her eyes. Trevor noticed first. His expression tightened. "Why is Moretti coming over here?" he muttered. Vanessa followed his gaze. The color drained from her face. Adrian continued forward. One table after another fell silent. Conversations dissolved. Even the musicians seemed to soften their performance as anticipation spread through the room. Danielle finally sensed something changing. She looked up. For a moment, she thought the man approaching must be heading toward someone behind her. Someone important. Someone accomplished. Certainly not her. Yet Adrian's eyes never left hers. When he stopped, the distance between them was less than 3 feet. Danielle felt every eye in the ballroom turn toward them. Her pulse quickened. "Good evening," Adrian said. His voice was calm and warm. Danielle Brooks. Hearing her full name from a stranger caught her off guard. "Good evening," she replied carefully. "I am sorry," she added. "Have we met?" A faint smile touched Adrian's face. Years ago, Danielle searched her memory but found nothing. The room remained completely silent. Nearby, Vanessa took a hesitant step forward. "Mr. Moretti," she began. "It is such an honor to have you here tonight." Adrian did not look at her. He did not acknowledge the interruption. His attention remained entirely on Danielle. "7 years ago," he said, "you sat beside a stranger in a hospital waiting room and offered him coffee. Danielle blinked. The memory surfaced slowly. A frightened man sitting alone near a vending machine. A difficult night. A simple act of kindness she had forgotten almost immediately afterward. "That was you?" she asked softly. Adrian nodded. "My mother was recovering from surgery. It was one of the hardest weeks of my life." Several guests exchanged surprised glances. No one had expected this conversation. Adrian continued. "You spoke to me when everyone else avoided me. You encouraged me when you had your own burdens to carry. You expected nothing in return." Danielle lowered her eyes, embarrassed by the attention. "It was just coffee." Adrian's smile widened slightly. "No, it was character." The words landed like a stone in still water. Around them, people listened carefully. Some looked toward Danielle with entirely new expressions. Others appeared uncomfortable. Vanessa stood frozen. Trevor stared silently. Adrian turned slightly, allowing his voice to carry throughout the ballroom. "For years I remembered that encounter because genuine kindness is rare, especially when nobody is watching." The silence deepened, and for the first time that evening, the story everyone thought they understood was beginning to change. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The ballroom seemed suspended in time. Danielle stood motionless as hundreds of eyes shifted between her and Adrian Moretti. Moments earlier, she had been the woman people politely overlooked. Now she had become the center of the room without asking for it. Adrian slowly turned toward the audience. His expression remained calm, but there was a quiet certainty in his voice that demanded attention. "Many people measure success by titles, income, or public recognition," he said. "But over the years I have learned that character is a far more reliable measure of a person's value." Guests listened carefully. Several who had spent the evening making assumptions about Danielle suddenly seemed uncomfortable. Adrian continued. "The woman standing beside me spent years caring for her father when it would have been easier to walk away. She sacrificed opportunities most people would never surrender. She showed compassion to strangers when she believed nobody would remember. And she did all of it without asking for applause." Danielle lowered her gaze. She felt heat rising to her cheeks. The attention was overwhelming. Across the room, Vanessa forced a smile that looked increasingly strained. Trevor stared at the floor. For the first time that evening, neither sibling seemed eager to speak. Adrian glanced toward the stage where the foundation director stood frozen with surprise. "A few months ago," Adrian said, "my organization began searching for a community initiative to support. We reviewed dozens of programs. Most looked impressive on paper. One stood apart. Curious murmurs spread through the crowd." Danielle frowned slightly. She had no idea what he was talking about. Adrian looked directly at her. 3 years ago, you helped establish a volunteer network for family caregivers. You organized support meetings, transportation assistance, and resource guides for people caring for elderly relatives." Danielle blinked in astonishment. The project had been small. Most people barely knew it existed. She had started it after her father's passing because she remembered how lonely caregiving could feel. "That program now helps hundreds of families each year," Adrian said. "And tonight I am pleased to announce that the Moretti Foundation will provide full funding for its expansion across the state." A collective gasp moved through the ballroom. Danielle's eyes widened. "What?" she whispered. Adrian smiled. "You built something extraordinary. It deserves the chance to grow." Applause began slowly. Then another group joined. Then another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom erupted. Guests rose from their seats. The sound filled every corner of the room. Danielle stood frozen as people who had ignored her all evening suddenly looked at her with admiration. Not because she had changed. Not because she had become someone new. Because the truth had finally become visible. Vanessa's expression collapsed entirely. The carefully crafted narrative she had spent the evening constructing was unraveling in front of everyone. The guests who had laughed at subtle jokes now understood what they had missed. They had mistaken sacrifice for failure. They had confused humility with weakness. And standing beneath the chandelier light, Danielle Brooks finally realized that the room was no longer seeing the version of her created by other people. For the first time, they were seeing her as she truly was. The applause seemed endless. Danielle stood beneath the chandeliers as wave after wave of recognition washed across the ballroom. Yet the most remarkable thing about the moment was not the funding announcement, the standing ovation, or even the sudden admiration surrounding her. It was that she remained exactly the same person she had been when she walked through the doors. She had not become more valuable in the last 10 minutes. The room had simply discovered a value that had always been there. As guests slowly returned to their seats, many approached Danielle personally. Men and women who had barely acknowledged her earlier now introduced themselves with genuine respect. Several asked about the caregiver network. Others shared stories about aging parents and difficult family journeys. For the first time all evening, conversations felt real, not performative, not patronizing, human. Across the room, Vanessa stood quietly near one of the banquet tables. The confidence she had worn like armor throughout the evening had disappeared. She watched as people gathered around Danielle, the same people she had carefully influenced only hours earlier. Trevor remained beside her, unusually silent. Neither sibling seemed to know what to say. Eventually, Vanessa crossed the ballroom. The crowd naturally parted. Danielle turned as her sister approached. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Years of distance stood between them. Years of assumptions. Years of hurt. Vanessa looked down briefly before meeting Danielle's eyes. "I owe you an apology," she said softly. Danielle studied her face. For the first time in a very long time, she saw something unfamiliar there. Not superiority. Not judgment. Regret. "You spent so many years taking care of Dad," Vanessa continued. "I told myself I was too busy. I told myself I would help later. The truth is that you carried responsibilities the rest of us avoided." The ballroom remained quiet enough for nearby guests to hear every word. Danielle could have embarrassed her sister. She could have reminded everyone of old wounds. She could have demanded accountability. Instead, she simply nodded. "We all make choices," she said gently. "The important thing is what we learn from them." Tears appeared in Vanessa's eyes. Trevor stepped forward next. "You deserved better from us," he admitted. Danielle looked at both siblings and felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Not revenge. Relief. Because carrying resentment for years is exhausting. And sometimes the greatest victory is not making someone feel small. It is refusing to become small yourself. Later that evening, as guests began leaving the gala, Adrian found Danielle standing near the entrance overlooking the city skyline. The lights stretched for miles beneath the dark sky. "You handled that with remarkable grace," Adrian said. Danielle smiled. "My father used to say that dignity is something nobody can take from you unless you hand it over." Adrian nodded thoughtfully. "He sounds like a wise man." He was. For a few seconds they stood together in comfortable silence. Then the doors opened and a cool breeze drifted through the lobby. Somewhere behind them, staff members cleared tables while guests exchanged final goodbyes. The evening that had begun with humiliation had ended with something entirely different. Respect. Truth. Recognition. As Danielle stepped outside, she felt lighter than she had in years. Not because strangers finally applauded her. Not because a powerful man had spoken on her behalf. But because she no longer needed anyone's permission to understand her own worth. And that night, beneath the glow of city lights, the woman they once overlooked walked forward with her head held high, while the world finally caught up to what she had known all along. If this story touched your heart, do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes that kindness, dignity, and character still matter.